This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan. And in for Amy this morning, Kristen McQuarrie, she of the Chicago Tribune editorial board. And I mean, really, you're on the Chicago Tribune's editorial board and you're going to post something like, Trump and Pecker are longtime friends.
That was for your private viewing.
It's public. It's on Facebook.
Well,
Trump and Pecker are longtime friends.
I figure you only have like 2 people as friends on Facebook.
If that, I doubt he'll give him the shaft. I mean, honestly.
It only took me an hour to come up with that one.
Yeah, all right. We'll take your David Pecker
Sophomoric humor
puns and or what Trump will nickname him on Twitter, because you know you're on the clock for a Trump nickname for David Pecker, his longtime friend who's got an immunity deal and, according to Associated Press, has a safe with Trump documents that relate to hush money payments to women that I guess is within the prosecutor's purview. I don't know. My offering, my suggested name, what I think Trump will term him on Twitter, Richard Cranium. Mm-hmm. And you didn't even get that when I said it before.
I did not.
All right,
no.
see if you can beat Richard Cranium. Steve on 88 has chimed in with Lake Flaccid.
Oh, God.
Okay. All right. Now, if you could elevate your level of discourse, please. We've got a guest. He's Steve Cortes, CNN political commentator, served on Trump's Hispanic Advisory Council. He's got a piece in RealClearPolitics.com this week, Mainstream Media versus Main Street USA. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan and Kristen. Thanks for having me. Happy Friday.
Good. Do you have a projected nickname for David Pecker before we begin?
I am not going to go down that road. I will tell you regarding Pecker, if it really is a safe, I want that safe to be opened a la Geraldo and the Vault. I mean, let's open the safe with a lot of fanfare and let's make it a big spectacle.
I like that.
Oh, that is a great idea.
Yeah. God, I missed the Al Capone reveal. That's very good. Yeah, it's a very good idea. All right, on this other matter, you penned this piece, Mainstream Media versus Main Street USA. Essentially, the argument is the D.C. press corps is obsessed with this John le Carré novel they're writing, but Main Street USA is focused on the economic benefits that have redounded to them since Trump has been president.
That's right. And, to continue with your theme of a novel, I say it's a tale of 2 cities, and I really believe that. And there's one city, which is the Acela corridor, essentially. And it's really 2 cities, Washington and New York, but the Washington press corps, the political and media elites of America, they are utterly obsessed with all things Mueller, all things Russia, all things Omarosa, you just name it, fill in the blank of which scandal it is, and utterly really just contemptible toward the president. And then you look at the alternate reality, it's almost as if it's a different universe of Main Street USA, where things, quite frankly, are going great. And in my opinion, largely because of the incredible policies of the Trump administration, particularly tax and regulatory relief. Those twin forces of economic dynamism and acceleration in this country are producing results, tangible, real results for Americans, most of whom are not politically obsessed, and they don't hang on every single headline on cable news, but instead worry about the bread and butter issues that matter to their lives, their job security, their incomes, their wages, growth, small business optimism, which is absolutely exploding. On all of those measures, this country is soaring, but you would never know it if you only paid attention to mainstream media.
I thought this part in your piece was really telling because it really taps into that sort of frenzy that is going on in Washington and being unreported, and that is that America saw a 400% increase in the number of Black-owned businesses, and this is from Black Enterprise Magazine. And so you make the point that the economy is lifting all boats, not just the already successful. Do you think stories like that are getting reported outside the D.C. Beltway by local outlets at all?
I hope so. I don't know because, unfortunately, I live within that very world that I'm criticizing, right, of national cable news. I know it's not getting reported there. That's one of the reasons I wrote this article, is to try to be a voice screaming that, hey, there are amazing things going on in this country that again, elite media doesn't want to pay attention to. By the way, that stat you mentioned, I actually had to check into it because I didn't believe it. It was so astounding. A 400% increase in new business. I mean, you just don't see those kind of numbers in the economy as big as the United States to see those kinds of growth numbers. And it's incredible, number one, for the African-American community to think that entrepreneurialism is starting to really take hold. And that's just within the last year, by the way. So that's not something where you can credit President Obama and say, oh, this was already an existing trend and, Trump just inherited a good situation. No, there is an explosion in small business optimism. That's not my opinion. I mean, these are surveys. We're almost at an all-time high in overall small business optimism, regardless of the owner's color. And we're just a smidge away from the all-time high, but a 4-decade-plus record. And then I'm particularly excited, though, too, for the people who haven't done well, the economic strivers, the underdogs. So, for instance, lowest unemployment ever for people without a high school degree. That the stat that you mentioned about an explosion in small business for blacks, Hispanics, my community, are statistically the most entrepreneurial demographic in America. Unfortunately, I don't have a stat on their business starts, but I know it has to be trending in the right direction. So all of these things tell us that not only is growth accelerating, which is important, but it's also broadening, meaning it's for everyone now, not as during the last decade where it really was only, honestly, owners of assets who did super well. If you had a lot of stocks or real estate, wage earners struggled. Now we're seeing the reverse. It's great news for America. It's not something that you're going to find covered because it's not glamorous and scandalous. And that's a shame, though, because we should be talking about these tangible, real-world benefits for regular working people.
President Trump cut a little 15-second ad this week presenting the contrast that Democrats want to abolish ICE and I want to abolish ISIS, and we're going to win. So on the matter of immigration, and he also had a little event with ICE officers where some were honored and so forth. But on this matter, particularly against the backdrop of this terrible event in Iowa where Molly Tibbetts was murdered by apparently a person who was in this country illegally, is the president and our Republicans making a mistake by pushing off a border security package and border security funding until after the midterms?
Yes, and Dan, 100% a mistake. And I'm unfortunately pretty pessimistic on the November elections. I really am. As optimistic as I am on the country and on the things Trump is doing, I'm pretty pessimistic on the Congress. History argues against us. Present polling certainly doesn't look good. But most of all, Republicans on the Hill, other than tax cuts, which was a massive win, but other than that, they really haven't cooperated in any way with the Trump agenda. And nowhere is it more stark to me than on the border issue. I think if we had full border funding, I think the whole equation would be different. The Trump coalition would be energized to come out in November, even though he's not on the ballot. And I think that immigration issues, the Democrats think that immigration issues favor them. I couldn't disagree more. I think that they favor us. And the Republicans in the Congress, quite frankly, show that they're as deep in the swamp in many ways as the Democrats are by their failure to address this. And
part of the story, not just to interrupt briefly, part of the story, and it's being reported, is that the individual charged with first-degree murder in Tibbetts' case worked for some dairy farmer in Iowa, so a Republican dairy farmer in Iowa, supposedly. So if that's true, this goes to the larger narrative, drain the swamp, sort of business Republicans who want cheap labor versus Democrats who just want open borders for their to create a new dependent constituency. So, and if we're going to use this as a discussion point in terms of public policy making, then you have to address all sides of it.
Right. And listen, I have advised the president personally, and he agrees, do everything you can to get the Republican leadership to force a vote on full border funding of the wall. And I doubt it would pass, particularly in the Senate. I think it would pass the House, not the Senate. But regardless, let's have the vote before the midterm, because let's put the Democrats on record so that we can go into October and November talking about this, talking about the fact that they want to abolish ICE. And that's no longer a fringe movement. I mean, we now see that from major politicians on the Democratic side, sitting senators, governors, mayor of New York, big candidates, Cortes and others. And I like to point out that ICE, not only do they do dangerous work to protect us, and they should be honored rather than vilified, but on top of that, ICE and the Border Patrol are the two most Hispanic agencies of the federal government. So that liberal narrative that this is a bunch of, whites, a retrograde sort of whites who are looking to abuse brown people, the reality couldn't be further from that, and we need to talk about it, message on it more. I wish they would vote on it. That would be, I think, a huge campaign issue for us. And unfortunately, too, these terrible stories are happening everywhere. Not just, Iowa, as awful as that was with Molly Tibbetts. We had a terrible one here in the Chicago area, out in Joliet.
Yeah.
Illegal immigrant who there was a ICE detainer for his removal in 2012, which was ignored. He raped 3 women, and he was just sentenced. And the judge, I give the judge a lot of credit, the judge in the sentencing said, you should have never been in this country. And he said something about, I don't want to quote exactly because I don't have it in front of me, but something like political correctness, kept you here and allowed you to commit these terrible crimes against Americans. That's real. I mean, there's no way to run away from that. Let's make the Democrats own that, because they believe in eliminating ICE, they believe in open borders, and they're against the wall.
There is there's a big enthusiasm gap in Illinois in some pretty normally safe Republican districts for some of the reasons that you talked about: lack of immigration reform, nothing on Obamacare, no entitlement reform, no debt reduction, no smaller government. So it's kind of hard to get a Trump voter to continue to elect some of these Republicans who are seeking reelection. But the threat of a Democratic House might be enough. Putting Nancy Pelosi back in charge might be enough to kind of drag them over the finish line. So what are some things, if the House flips, that voters should prepare for that could be undone or would advance under a Pelosi House? Right.
Well, listen, and I've been, every chance I get, saying this on air, whether it's radio interviews like yours or my CNN hits, it's impeachment. I mean, to me, that is, that's the end-all, be-all of the Democratic Party. They're whispering about it because they're smart enough, they have enough guile to know that they don't want to sell that as their agenda. But it is their agenda. I mean, we know it. We know it's the agenda of their biggest donors. A few of their public figures, their politicians, have been willing to admit on the record that they're going there. But they are going there. They were going there before the Cohen case. Now that they have the Cohen case as a specious argument, I mean, I think it's weak, but it's enough for them to say the president committed a crime. Why? Because Michael Cohen said he did. I think that's ludicrous, but that's enough for them. And unfortunately, I think our founders were magnificent in our Constitution. I don't think they thought through impeachment. The fact that it just takes one majority vote in the House on basically any grounds they believe are high grounds and misdemeanors tells me that if the Democrats take the House, we are headed to impeachment. And that will be, unfortunately, what will rule most of 2019, rather than the growth agenda that we've seen so far, which is fabulous, but we need to continue and add to it. For instance, things like you mentioned, defunding or repealing and replacing Obamacare as an example. We're not going to get to anything, though, if we are wrapped up in an impeachment drama, which would dominate months of the new Congress in 2019 if the Democrats win. So I'm trying to warn and scare, quite frankly, Republicans and the Trump coalition into getting out, because in some ways this is his second reelect. Or his first reelect, but his second election.
Right. He is Steve Cortes, CNN political commentator, served on the Trump Hispanic Advisory Council. The column at RealClearPolitics.com. You can check out Mainstream Media versus Main Street USA. Steve, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And you joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Listen to Dan and Amy on your smartphone. Download the AM560 mobile app today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.